You're lying back in a dentist chair. There's a tiny pinch in your arm and a voice telling you to count backwards from 10. You get to 7, maybe 6, then someone's gently shaking your shoulder, and it's over. Whatever it was, you slept through the whole thing. Now, do the same thing in 1842. No needle, no counting, a wooden table, leather straps, and a room full of people who came to watch. You will be awake. You will feel everything. And the man with the knife can offer you exactly one mercy. One. Speed. For thousands of years, that was surgery, a race between the knife and what a human being can endure. And then, in the space of about a year, it just ended. This story goes through a Paris bedroom where one of England's most famous novelists stayed wide awake through her own cancer operation and wrote down every second of it. A London operating theater where students pulled out pocket watches like they were at a horse race. Laughing gas parties, a country doctor who solved the whole problem and told nobody. A dentist destroyed in front of a jeering crowd for being right. And one October morning in a Boston lecture hall that split the history of medicine into a before and an after. We're going everywhere. Starting with the show. It's London, the early 1840s. University College Hospital, the room where surgery happens, is called an operating theater. And that name is not a metaphor. It's built like one. Steep tiers of standing room packed with medical students, curious gentlemen, sometimes rival surgeons. The ticket was free. The show was you. Down at the bottom, a wooden table. Under the table, sawdust. The surgeons wore in old frock coats, stiff with the blood of every operation that came before. Washing them was considered fussy. A crusted coat was a resume. And the star of this particular theater is Robert Liston. 6'2", famously strong, known as the fastest knife in the West End. Liston could take off a leg in around 2.5 minutes, and he wanted witnesses. As the story goes, he'd call up to the galleries, "Time me, gentlemen, time me!" And the students would crane forward, pocket watches out. That sounds like showing off.
It was showing off, but understand what the speed was for. Your patient is awake. Every second of cutting is a second of the worst pain a human body can produce. Shock alone, just the pain itself, could kill a patient on the table before the blood loss got its chance. So the greatest surgeons of the age weren't the most delicate hands or the deepest thinkers. They were quite literally the fastest men in the room. A surgeon was judged the way we judge sprinters, and for the same reason. Every extra second cost something that couldn't be paid back. Mercy, measured with a stopwatch. And the audience knew it. That's the strangest part to modernize. Surgery was public. In London, in Paris, in Edinburgh, every teaching city had its theater and its crowd. Students needed to learn, yes, but the galleries also filled with people who'd simply come to watch, the way you'd go to a hanging or a prize fight.
The theater would hush when the patient was brought in. Then it would get loud. The patients? Some walked in on their own legs and climbed onto the table themselves, which might be the bravest thing I've ever heard. Others had to be carried. Almost all of them were held. The surgeon's assistants, called dressers, gripped shoulders, arms, legs. Their job description was body weight.
So what did they give you before the knife came out? What was on the menu? The honest answer? Not much, and none of it worked. There was alcohol, a tumbler of brandy, maybe 2, on the theory that a drunk patient is a slightly quieter patient. Mostly what alcohol did was thin your blood and loosen your grip on your courage. But it was tradition, and nobody had anything better to put in its place. There was laudanum, opium dissolved in alcohol, the Victorian answer to almost everything, from headaches to heartbreak. Enough of it made you drowsy, nauseous, and confused. No amount of it made a knife painless. You'd be sick and screaming instead of just screaming. Some surgeons packed the limb in ice and hoped for numbness. And in the 1830s and 40s, fashionable London briefly fell in love with mesmerism, a showman waving his hands over you until you fell into a trance.
A few surgeons swore by it and reported patients lying calm through whole operations. Most of them watched a mesmerized patient scream mid-operation exactly once and went back to brandy. That's it. That was the menu. Alcohol, opium, ice, and hand-waving. Plus 4 men to hold you down when all of it failed, which was always. Which explains the most important rule of pre-anesthetic surgery. You didn't have it. Not unless the alternative was death, and soon. Surgery meant the outside of the body. Amputations, tumors you could see, bladder stones. Nobody was opening a chest or an abdomen on a conscious, thrashing patient. The entire interior of the human body was simply off the map. Not because surgeons didn't know what was there, because no one could survive the visit. If you want to know what it was actually like on that table, not from the surgeon's side, from the patient's, one document tells you more than any textbook ever written. September 30th, 1811, Paris. Frances Burney, known to everyone as Fanny, is one of the most celebrated novelists in Europe. Jane Austen read her, and she has a growth in her right breast that the doctors believe is cancer. Her surgeon is Dominique Jean Leray, Napoleon's own battlefield surgeon, the best knife in France. 7 medical men file into her bedroom. They put her in an armchair and lay a cambric handkerchief over her face. It's so thin she can see straight through it. She watches the glitter of the polished steel. There was no straining against it, no rescue coming. She simply had to sit in that chair under that veil of fabric and let it happen. Awake. She stayed conscious through almost all of it. And 9 months later, it took her 9 months before she could bear to put it on paper, she wrote a letter to her sister Esther describing exactly what she felt. The letter survives. Here is one sentence. When the dreadful steel was plunged into the breast, cutting through veins, arteries, flesh, nerves, I needed no injunctions not to restrain my cries. I began a scream that lasted unintermittingly during the whole time of the incision, and I almost marvel that it rings not in my ears still. She felt the blade, in her words, scraping against her breastbone. And she lived. She recovered and went on living for another 29 years, which tells you the surgery worked and tells you what working cost. That letter from 1812 is one of the only first-person accounts we have of major surgery before anesthesia. Doctors wrote thousands of pages about operations. The people on the table almost never got a word in. Fanny Burney got hers in, and it has been ringing in history's ears ever since. Now here's the part that's genuinely hard to believe. The pain wasn't even the worst of your problems. Say you survived the knife. The shock, the blood loss, the screaming minutes on the table, you were now entering the most dangerous phase of the whole experience, recovery. In a hospital in the 19th century. The numbers came later, but they're worth hearing now. The Scottish doctor James Young Simpson, remember that name, he comes back into this story, published a study in 1869 he titled Hospitalism. He counted more than 2,000 amputations across Britain. In the big city hospitals, over 40% of amputation patients died. The same operation done in country practice, on a farmhouse kitchen table, 11%. The grandest hospitals in Europe, the best surgeons alive, and your odds were nearly 4 times worse than on a farm. And it wasn't just Britain. The figures Simpson and his contemporaries gathered ran the same direction in London, in Paris, in Boston. The grander the hospital, the worse you did. Nobody could explain it. Germ theory didn't exist yet. Infection just seemed to live in the hospital walls. They called it hospital air, as if the architecture were breathing on you. It was, in fact, largely the surgeons themselves. The unwashed hands, the proud, crusty coats, the same sponge carried from wound to wound, patient after patient. So this is surgery before 1846, an operation you delay until you were dying, performed at maximum speed while you were awake, followed by a coin flip against an invisible killer nobody had discovered yet. Why it stayed that lethal for that long is a whole story of its own. For now, just hold this thought. Everyone, surgeons, patients, everyone, agreed the pain was unavoidable, a fact of nature, like gravity. Except the cure had already been discovered, decades earlier, and the world was using it as a party trick. The year is 1800. A 21-year-old chemist in Bristol named Humphrey Davy is experimenting on himself with a gas called nitrous oxide. He notices two things. One, breathing it makes you euphoric. He nicknames it laughing gas. Two, it kills pain. It eased his own aching tooth. He publishes all of this in 1800 and writes that the gas may probably be used with advantage during surgical operations in which no great effusion of blood takes place. Used with advantage during surgical operations, in print, in 1800. And for 46 years, nobody does it. Instead, the gas has become entertainment. Traveling showmen charge admission to laughing gas demonstrations. Medical students throw ether frolics, parties where everyone huffs ether and staggers into the furniture. For 2 generations, the answer to surgery's oldest problem was literally a party trick, wheezing around lecture halls and drawing rooms while one floor up, patients bit down on leather straps. It gets more painful than that. In 1842, a country doctor in Jefferson, Georgia, named Crawford Long, a man who'd seen his share of ether frolics, noticed that people under ether banged into things and felt nothing. So on March 30th, 1842, he gave ether to a patient, James Venable, and cut a tumor from his neck. Painlessly. 4.5 years before anyone in Boston. And then Long kept quietly using it on his country patients and didn't publish a word until 1849. The finish line had been crossed in rural Georgia, and nobody knew. Then came the near miss. Horace Wells, a young dentist in Hartford, watches a laughing gas show in December 1844 and sees a volunteer gash his leg and feel nothing. Wells connects the dots instantly. He even has one of his own teeth pulled under the gas the next morning. In January 1845, he gets his shot. A public demonstration in Boston before Harvard medical students. And it goes wrong.
The gas is underdone. The patient groans mid-extraction. The room reads it as pain and starts jeering one word at him. Humbug! Wells walks out ruined. He was right. Nitrous oxide is still used in dentistry today, and being right early bought him nothing but the laughter. That jeer cost more than one man's career. Every surgeon in that room went back to holding patients down for another 21 months because a demonstration went badly once. That's the thing about being early. The world doesn't grade you on being right. It grades you on the show. So that's where we stand in the autumn of 1846. The solution? Discovered in 1800. Demonstrated on a Georgia farm in 1842. Booed off a Boston stage in 1845. All the pieces on the table, and the world still strapping patients down. What finally changed everything wasn't a new discovery at all. Just, at last, a demonstration that worked. October 16th, 1846, Massachusetts General Hospital. The surgical amphitheater under the glass dome. Students in the tiers, skeptics everywhere. This is the same city, practically the same audience, that laughed Horace Wells out of the room 21 months earlier. The patient is Edward Gilbert Abbott, a young house painter with a tumor on his neck. The senior surgeon is John Collins Warren, one of the most respected and most doubtful men in American medicine. And the man everyone's waiting on is not a surgeon at all. He's a dentist. William Morton, who has been up all night fiddling with his inhaler, arrives late to the operation that will make him famous, carrying a glass globe of ether-soaked sponge. He'd scented the ether and tried to patent the mix under the name Letheon, because Morton was, on top of everything else, a businessman. Nobody was fooled for long. It was ether. Abbott breathes from the globe. His eyes close. Warren takes the knife, makes the incision, ties off the tumor, and Abbott doesn't scream. Doesn't thrash. The dressers stand there with nothing to hold down. When it's done, Warren, the great skeptic, turns to the gallery and, as the story has come down to us, says the sentence every medical student learns. Gentlemen, this is no humbug. The same word, the exact word they'd thrown at Wells. That's how fast the world turned over.
News of Ether crossed the Atlantic by steamship in a matter of weeks, and on December 21st, 1846, it reached the one man in this story with the most to lose from it. Robert Liston, the fastest knife in the West End. Speed was his whole legend, and here was a bottle that made speed pointless. Liston's patient that day at University College Hospital was Frederick Churchill, a 36-year-old butler with a ruined knee. Ether was administered, Liston operated, and old habits die hard. The leg came off in under half a minute. Churchill woke moments later, and the story goes, asked when the operation was going to begin.
The theater erupted, and Liston, the showman, gave the New Age its verdict. This Yankee Dodge, gentlemen, beats mesmerism hollow.
You'd think the story ends there. Pain solved, curtain, everyone lives happily and unconscious ever after. History is never that tidy. First, Ether had rivals. In Edinburgh, James Young Simpson, the hospital numbers man from earlier, wanted something better for childbirth, and his research method was, let's say, direct. He and his assistants sat around his dining table of an evening sniffing chemicals to see what happened. On the 4th of November, 1847, they tried a heavy, sweet liquid called chloroform. The next thing any of them remember is waking up on the floor. Simpson, from somewhere under the table, declared it far stronger and better than ether, which, given where he was lying, was hard to argue with. Within weeks, he was using it for deliveries. Then, the bill arrived. January 28th, 1848, a little over a year after the celebration started. A 15-year-old girl in the north of England, Hannah Greener, was given chloroform for the removal of an infected toenail.
A toenail. She was dead within minutes. The first recorded death from anesthesia, and the world's first hard lesson that the miracle had a dose, and the dose could kill. The man who took that lesson seriously was John Snow. Yes, the same London doctor who'd later trace cholera to a water pump. Snow turned anesthesia from a rag and a guess into a science. Measured doses, proper inhalers, careful notes. And in 1853, he attended the most famous patient in the world. Queen Victoria took chloroform, administered by Snow, for the birth of Prince Leopold. There had been loud religious and medical objections to easing the pain of childbirth. It's hard to overstate how completely a royal endorsement ended that argument. If it was good enough for the Queen, the debate was over. But here's the twist that matters most. Anesthesia didn't just remove pain. It removed the clock. Surgeons no longer had to be sprinters. They could slow down, take care, go deeper, into the abdomen, eventually the chest, all that territory that had been off the map for the whole of human history. And for about 20 years, that new freedom made something worse. Longer, deeper operations meant more time for infection, and patients kept dying in recovery wards at the same terrible rates, while medicine went on fighting an enemy it couldn't see. Anesthesia conquered pain. It never conquered death. That took another revolution, and that one had to fight even harder to be believed.
So, back to your dentist chair. The pinch, the voice, 10, 9, 8. On one side, Fanny Burney in an armchair, watching polished steel through a handkerchief. Frederick Churchill waking up to ask when it would begin. 4 strong men, paid in body weight. On the other side, you, mildly annoyed about the parking, being asked to count. The distance between her scream and your nap is one October morning in Boston, and a 46-year stretch where the answer sat in plain sight, wheezing at parties, waiting for somebody to take it seriously. Nobody holds you down anymore. Nobody times the surgeon from the gallery. The only fight left in the whole experience is you against the number 7, and you always lose. That's the miracle. Not the machines, not the monitors, the losing. Somewhere between 8 and 6, you get the one mercy every patient in every theater for all of human history begged for and never got.
Sleep well.